right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm curious by a show of hands, how many people here are engineers? Okay. Do we have any managers? Do we have any people that are on call? Yeah, wow, okay, a number of people. And do we have any people here that are kind of executives and just want to know when the incident's going to be over? All right. So I want to start with showing this picture, and it's two people looking out the same window. And this was shared by Nipin Anand, who's an organizational psychologist that studies accidents in the oil and gas industry. And what this is really showing is that we can be looking out the same window and seeing different things. I might look out the window and notice the beautiful tree because I really like trees, whereas Rob might notice the really cool car across the street, and we might both miss each other's things. But without each other, the mental model is incomplete, and the picture of the window is incomplete. And we see this a lot in incidents. We see this a lot in how we review incidents after they happened, and how we share these mental models after incidents. And I want to quickly show this other image, and this is by Richard Cook. Has anyone seen this before? Oh, great. I love showing it to folks. So this is what's called above the line and below the line of representation, or like the sharp end and the blunt end. And so everything below that line of representation is what's called the cognitive work, the details that make it interesting for us to do the work, how we think about the work, and what it means to be above the line versus below the line. So folks working above the line of representation actually continuously build and refresh their models of what lies below the line. And that activity is critical to understanding the resilience of internet-facing systems and the principal source of our adaptive capacity in companies. And so we're going to talk about these lines of representation through this talk today. But first, I actually want to share a quick and real story of varying mental models. And this was from an organization I was at several years ago. And basically, at this company, they had very much a you build it here culture. And this was a really long time ago, so this company had also built their own feature flagging system. And essentially, that feature flagging system actually wasn't super resilient anymore. It had a lot of inefficiencies in it. It essentially wasn't very type safe, so it didn't have very good type safety in it. It was really easy to make mistakes at the company in this technology, and so they had a new technology. And they sent out an email, as you do when you're running change management, and they said, please no longer use this old technology on this date. There are multiple issues with it, mainly the lack of type safety and maintenance. And has anyone here gone through change management at a company or had to lead a change management effort? You know they didn't just send one email. They sent a lot. They sent Slacks. They sent team manager. They had trainings. And then the company had a month-long code freeze over the holidays. And so the developers were working on stuff, but they were building up all their changes. And when they got back, they went to start pushing their changes. And the way this old feature flagging system would work is when you wanted to deploy a change and you wanted to test to see how it looked in production, a lot of developers would hack around this by typing in an arbitrarily large feature flag number. And so they would pick just this huge number that couldn't possibly be a feature flag so that the system wouldn't find it and deploy it. And so someone was pushing a change and they typed in a really large feature flagging number. And what essentially happened was that it was higher than the max integer that Java could parse. And it brought everything down. And, but it only brought everything down for like a minute or two. It really wasn't that big deal at the end of the day. And the team I was on was running an incident review on this, and the manager of this person pulled me aside and was like, hey, they feel really bad about this. Like, can we just kind of like brush it under the rug? And I was like, totally. I was like, I still would love to go talk to them. And so I went and spoke with them, and I said, hey, can you show me how you deployed this change? And they were like, Nora, you know, we worked together on this. Like, I know you know how we do these things. And I was like, yeah, humor me for a second. And they showed me the old system that was run. And I was like, oh, did you know there's a new feature flagging system? And they had no idea. And then I went and told the team that owned the old feature flagging system, and they said, I didn't even know that that was still running. And it was running on a single node. And so what I learned was that the commonality was that all the very tenured engineers did not know that this was happening, but all the new engineers to the company did know it was happening, and they didn't even know about the old system. And so having that quick conversation helped surface this gap in mental models, and it also helped surface this gap in how we communicated in that organization and how information gets spread out, especially an organization that was running as long as that one did. So my name is Nora Jones. I do not sing very well, so apologies if anyone thought they were coming to a concert. I have had a wild career in this industry. I've done a lot of different roles. I've been a software engineer, I've been a technical account manager, and I've always been in incidents. And about 5 years ago, I left my role at Slack to form an incident management company called Jeli.io, which last year got acquired by PagerDuty. And I'm really excited to be here today. I love reInvent. 7 years ago, I actually had the opportunity to keynote here about chaos engineering. And my thoughts and experiences have changed a lot since then. And so I'm really excited to share with you about that today. And we've been at PagerDuty and part of PagerDuty for over a year now. And it's really exciting to integrate Jeli into the operations cloud. So we now have this end-to-end communication and coordination. And this morning, Jen Tejada actually announced our partnership with Amazon Q and PagerDuty Advanced for faster, more informed decision-making during incidents. So we're helping make customer operations better, smarter, and faster using this automation. And I want to hand it over to Rob.
Hello, I'm Rob Zuber, CTO of CircleCI. I like that all of my images are just CircleCI. But to prove, I have worked at CircleCI over 10 years, actually. And I always say that one thing about working at the same place for over 10 years is you've lived with the consequences of your decisions. And so you probably get to hear a little bit about that today. But to prove that I haven't always worked at CircleCI, I was trying to think about the first production incident that I participated in. And it would have been 1998. And just to give you a flavor, our system was down, so I strapped on my rollerblades and rollerbladed to the bookstore to find out what a deadlock was and how I could stop having them. It was a very small company. I became the DBA that day. And we'll talk about information flow in a minute, so I'll tell you more later, but that's all I wanted to say about myself.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. So a lot of this talk is focused on the hidden ROI in our communications, and especially the hidden ROI in our communications during emergencies. During emergencies is where all rules and procedures go out the window and people just do what they need to get done. And not studying how people talk to each other and not diagnosing how people talk to each other in those moments is a huge miss for extracting that investment. And we've noticed a lot in the software industry that we react to incidents, but we don't always take time to learn from them in a way that builds this organizational context and lifts us up to move faster. And that actually gets really expensive over time. And so understanding how you communicate, especially during urgent situations like incidents, builds more organizational context and leads to more resilient systems. And so we want to talk about how to do that.
Yeah. So just as a simple example, I think to get everyone into the frame of mind, this is more like a bug than an incident. But again, and we talked about different perspectives, like seeing the cat, seeing the car. I can't remember if it was a cat. Was it a cat?
Car.
No, mine was the car. Where were you looking at?
Tree.
The tree. Okay. Well, there's probably a cat in the tree in a good story, right? Okay. So a thing that came up recently, I'm looking at something that someone else is doing where they said, okay, we had this regression, we fixed this bug, and they're saying, great, the bug is fixed, and I'm saying, I can see this bug in 3 other places because there's repetition of the same implementation. Who's fixing the fact that it's implemented in 4 places, not who's fixing the bug and moving us on to the next thing? And so that happens at the smallest level, it happens at the biggest level. And to Nora's point, particularly in incidents, we're so concerned about the incident and the cause of the incident, we miss the opportunity to step up a level. And particularly as a leader, that's a thing that I focus on a lot, is how do we go up a level and say, how did this happen? How do we prevent the kinds of scenarios where this happens?
And we see a lot of that, incident reviews, especially when they don't hit the news. Maybe your customers didn't notice. They end up happening in a vacuum with the engineers closest to the situation, but that's a miss. There's all these other people involved. There's execs sometimes, there's marketing, there's PR, there's your social folks, there's maybe customer success. Like all of those folks should be talking to each other. It's a huge opportunity after incidents to understand all those people's mental models. And I want to talk about Gen AI for a sec, because you can't automate your learning with Gen AI, but this is a really good opportunity to collaborate with it. Generative AI aids, but it shouldn't eliminate the understanding of the cognitive work, because that is how organizations get better. And so I want to share Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I'm sure some folks have seen this before. And this hierarchy is often depicted as a pyramid with the most basic needs on the bottom and then the most advanced needs on the top. And essentially, it suggests that people must fulfill the bottom needs in order to be truly successful in organizations. And I think for a while, the tech industry, we were really feeling like our basic needs were met and people were thriving and people were creative. But a lot has changed in the last couple years, right? So much has changed. We were kind of in a growth at all costs industry and everyone was hiring, right? And now revenue's king, being cash flow positive is king. We had developers making a lot of tooling and process decisions, and now there's more mandates for cost efficiency. There was really highly valued technical creativity, and now it's creatively leveraging AI that's highly valued. And there's more comfortability in business, more room to experiment, but maybe companies are facing more competition and more paranoia. And maybe there was a really clear definition of an incident at your organization. And now that definition of an incident has changed because your business has changed. I think back to when I worked at Netflix, we had this one key indicator that needed to be up and surfaced, and that was stream starts per second, when a user pressed play, and it was fairly predictable traffic. But Netflix has live events now, and I'm sure their definition of an incident has changed. And I keep thinking back to my colleagues that were there then when I was there, and they're there now, and I wonder how they're wrapping their heads around what an incident means in this organization. And the definition of an incident changes from company to company, and that shouldn't be defined by engineers. It should be defined by your business. And this is why it's important to talk to people in the business during incidents. But I bring this back up is because maybe we're a little bit towards the bottom again, and that's okay. We're adapting, we're rebuilding, and we may not be feeling the bottom as much anymore. And part of this is because we are in this time of adaptation. And this is a really great time to reflect and retrospect and understand people's mental models in your orgs. And so I want to bring us back to learning from incidents and communication patterns, because it asks us not why this happened, but why did it make sense for us to do it this way so that we can be better in the future.
All right, so we're going to walk through this in 3 parts. First, how organizational knowledge is constructed, how organizational knowledge flows inside an organization, how knowledge flows inside an organization. Second, what matters about conversations and why there's so much rich context in the conversation itself and why we want to look at that. And then finally, what do we do differently in the future? How do we go from here? So first, on organizational knowledge construction, I think it's really important to highlight, it feels important for me to highlight, that these are entirely Nora's slides. And she said to me, does this make sense to you? And I was like, I could overlay a story on these slides. Like, everyone has lived this experience. So we'll jump right into it. In the beginning of a company, well, I think I mentioned that I've worked at some small companies, and I joined CircleCI a little bit into its life, but it's been a long time. And so I wasn't probably person A, B, C, or D in this particular story, but I know the names of all those people and who plays what roles. So, and for the purposes of this story, when I say new technology, you think Mongo, okay? Like I saw that, I'm like, oh yeah, I know what I substitute into that value. No problem. I've got this story, right? So person A, Paul, decides that we're going to use, oh, sorry, are we supposed to not? It doesn't matter. All right. It was a great decision. We're going to use Mongo, and you could read this sentence, right? Like anyone that chose it now, this is 2011, 2012, right? It's going to make us go faster, right? All developers at the time were like, relational databases are complex. Imagine if we could just write stuff into the store and read it back. It's going to be amazing. And I know I literally could name all these people. I won't bother. Okay, yeah, if it gets us there faster, we're also a shop that chose Clojure, so make your own opinions. And someone else saying, well, I guess if it's easy, I don't know, like I'm not really familiar with it. And so person A, so I'll teach you, it's fairly straightforward. But it's fairly straightforward in this story at least means I read the docs and I know how to do two things. Not I have run this thing in anger, like I have run it in a large operational environment, et cetera, et cetera. Not to be all, spoiler. Okay, so scary things are coming, right? Now we have a new expert in the organization, official expert on this technology. And in theory, full expert, as already disclosed. Again, you get the point. You've been there. Has anyone not heard this story in their own organization, right? Okay, so you've got an expert. I've got this. I'll teach you. I read the docs. It took me 3 minutes. Like, I know how to put an object into Mongo and take one back out of Mongo, so we're set. Like, this is going to be great. We're going to build the best application ever. And a couple people ask questions, so they write some code, and they've used Mongo a little bit, and they're learning a little bit, right? And the feature that new technology was used, the company. So we're still here. CircleCI, large successful organization, awesome. Still have a lot of Mongo, big hit, a lot of demand, growth, right? And the growth in scaling the product and the platform is one thing, but also growing the organization, right? I'm on one of those other like unlabeled green dots right there. I was about this era when I joined. And things happen. Now there's more people need to learn about the technology because it turns out not everyone is an expert in databases, let alone in particular databases. Person A is super busy, right? They're one of the founding members of your engineering team. They've got a bunch of stuff they need to do. They don't have time to train everybody else on this thing. And some things start to go a little bit sideways along the way. And what's interesting, I love this particular point, is more people use the technology, Mongo, differently than person A had ever believed was possible. When we get to the incident, you'll hear all about it. And so person A is not even an expert anymore. That one person in the company that was the expert is no longer an expert, and now you have none. So fantastic concept to follow on this. As the complexity of a system increases, the accuracy or understanding of any single agent's own model decreases. Yeah, I hear the, oh yeah, I've been there too, right? So now no one is an expert in the organization. And then the incident happens. Do you want a cool incident story? All right, so what we did with Mongo, this predates all container orchestration platforms that you're familiar with, and we had a very large fleet of boxes that we needed to manage the state of. And we were using Mongo, and the only way at the time, this is also like Mongo 2 or something, to get atomic reads and writes was to use something called find and modify. So you fetched a document, and then before you wrote it back, you checked that it was unchanged, and if it was changed, then you rewrote it. Now imagine thousands of machines all trying to change the state of your entire environment simultaneously, and every time every one of them tries to write, the document has changed since the time that they fetched it. So no machine can process work fast enough to actually take work. When you run a build system, we didn't talk a lot about what CircleCI does, but we run a CI/CD platform. Not being able to run jobs is bad. That's a bad feature of the system. And scaling the system to try to compensate actually led to fewer jobs being run because more machines were contesting for this single document. Now, I understand a lot more detail, which I will not go into because I was there. What's interesting is, I don't know which person I am in this, but post that incident, I was now probably the expert in the organization because I was the one who solved a lot of those things. And then a very small number of people participated in understanding what was truly happening and then building a model of a system that would support us. So this was not re-architect the system time. This was, we can't build today. Not like what would a great system look like in the future, but how do we get building tomorrow? We get paid to build software, that's what we do, and we can't run people's builds. So what is the fastest, quickest thing that we can do to get this system running? And it's the small team just trying to solve that. So the rest of this cluster of people, their like green level, bright green is going down, right? As a very small pocket of people are going up. And I think I mentioned at the beginning, I'm the CTO. Like, I probably shouldn't be the one expert / DBA on the Mongo installation. If that's happening in your company, fix it immediately. All right, so again, there's a small cluster, a few folks understand. Your knowledge is getting more and more limited. You're really not taking advantage. Small group has done the work. They're focused on fixing the problem, the immediate problem that's in front of them. And a lot of people are losing understanding. We're going to move on from this, but I think the other interesting thing that I would take away from that is we declared around that time, maybe a year or two later, what we should do is move to Postgres because everyone understands Postgres. We have a lot of Postgres now and a lot of Mongo. Like, if you think your solution is to get off of the technology, you should have made that decision before you adopted the technology. It's going to be with you for a very, very long time. So understanding how, when you say, oh, well, we only need a couple experts because we're going to move off of this thing, you're going to need those couple experts for like 10 years. Mm-hmm. And so you probably need more than a couple. All right. And again, everyone has different goals and priorities. Of this pool, we have smaller and smaller knowledge and understanding. And trust me, I know this part of the story. That person is now involved in basically every incident because that's the only way that that's the only tool that you have to solve these problems. And a few things now happen in the organization. You continue to grow, you add more customers, there's more demand, there's more demands on every individual, people get busy, scope of person A's role grows. You keep hiring, less and less time to grow people and teach them about the technology. And okay, this part, I don't know if that's totally accurate in my story, but it's pretty close. Sure. I in fact migrated Mongo from an outsourced provider onto our own platform by myself on Christmas Eve. Ask me how my Christmas went. All right. Somewhere around maybe later, this is not exactly on this timeline, but at some point you lose a bunch of people, right? This is a reality today. This has happened in a lot of organizations recently, where you lose some of these experts. And so the real graph, the real understanding of what's happening in your organization is much, much more complex than you ever pictured it to be, and it's never this person has the knowledge and they spread it with everyone else. So it's important that you do the work, right? The work of fixing the bug, fixing the issue, making the change, changing the system, but you can't really do that without doing the hard cognitive work. Going back to Nora's previous diagram, like down underneath, what was the mental model that we had? What did we understand about the system or not understand about the system that got us into this situation? And that part of the job is much, much harder. And now Nora's going to talk a little bit more about how to make it work.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And one thing I want to underscore is person A, or even Rob in this situation, while they're an expert in that, they become inherently bad at knowing what they're an expert in. These folks are not good at explaining why it is they do what they do because it's so second nature for them. And where I see a lot of orgs get this wrong is that they put that work on person A. Like they're like, you're great, but you need to spend more time training people or scaling yourself. And this person doesn't know how to do that, right? And so we can actually put this work on the rest of our organization by helping them get curious about asking person A questions. Hey, how did you know to look at that dashboard? What made you bring that up? Did you look at that in other incidents before? Have them actually pull up their screen and show you. This is how you create more of those folks and make person A less of a bottleneck, because they're very valuable. They don't have time to write all these docs. They don't have time to think about what makes them an expert, and they kind of lose sight of it over time. So I'm going to jump into a story, and so this is probably the most technical part of the presentation, so stay with us. So we're going to do a tale of two incident reviews, and this is why the conversation matters. And a spoiler alert, it's the same incident review twice. So I'm going to show you incident 1, which was a seemingly innocuous incident that didn't have much customer impact and didn't deserve a thorough postmortem. Does this resonate with anyone? I'm sure it's happened this week, probably for all of us, right? It was a templated approach. It was completed by the members of the team that were most involved in the incident, and the purpose was to file and report. They just wanted to kind of check a box and say, we're done. We're too busy for anything else, and we didn't plan for this incident. No one plans for an incident, and you have to get back to the other work that you were supposed to be doing. And so if we look at this post-incident review, this is everything that was in it. So I want you to imagine that you are a new employee at this company joining this team, and you are reading this incident review to get ramped up on the system. So a change was made to some of our search infrastructure tooling. So this is a fictional e-commerce company that you're joining. And it updates which search index to look at each day. So we were able to recreate the issue, and soon after it had been reported, engineering was able to track down the problem and fix the bad configuration. Due to the nature of the bug, no pre-processing work had to be done in order for search to be functional again. Then we have a little bit more of a detailed summary where we learn a little bit more about what was happening. The search index is split into collections, one collection for older SKUs, which are stock keeping units, and 2 to 3 collections for recent SKUs, 1 per day for newly created SKUs. Each collection can be individually submitted for reading or writing, and since search queries are typically all read from collections from a given vendor, so each vendor has their own sets of SKUs. And so we employ a feature called collection read alias, which allows us to query from many collections using one name. As new collections are created, which is done 2 days in advance, they're added to the read alias. Due to a bug in our tooling introduced a week before, newly created daily collections were not being added to the read alias. And since they're added and created 2 days in advance, the first collection affected by the bug was 3 days ago. So we kind of had a latent bug that we didn't realize. And then, pretty typical postmortem. We have a timeline. So our timeline starts on December 4th. The bug is introduced in Python tooling. And then the December 6th collection is created and not added to the alias. We have the newly created SKUs that start going into the December 6th alias. The incident channel starts based on customer reports. The search team's paged and begins work. And then at 2:31 on December 6th, so 2 days after that bug is introduced, we start noticing the stuff. And so someone says, okay, I see an elevated error rate, but it's a red herring. We think a borked Kafka broker is a potential cause. We rule out the borked Kafka broker. Misconfiguration on our read alias is finally identified as the cause. Configuration is fixed. Bug is confirmed, fix is applied to the index file. And then we have our impact. All users had a degraded search experience for the 20 minutes over which the incident took place. Now this is interesting to me, because if I'm new coming into this org, is 20 minutes good or is 20 minutes bad? I've been at orgs where that's fine, but I've been at orgs where that's also terrible. And what was this degraded experience? And so then we look at contributing factors. There was a lack of type system or static analysis in code. An alert that would have detected this is also broken. You could put these contributing factors in any incident in the tech industry. I guarantee it, right? What does lack of type system mean? And what does alert that would have mean, right? If it would have done it. And so putting would have or should have in your incident reviews kind of leads us to this mythical fairyland where we're pretending this thing unfolded in the way it was supposed to. And that's, kind of counterfactual language. So one thing I would challenge folks is to start thinking, if you see this, to try to change it to how it actually worked. And so what went well? Fairly quick fix. Is 20 minutes good or is 20 minutes bad? What was the customer impact? 20 minutes, and it sounds like vendors were maybe impacted too. Did it impact our partners? What went wrong? Alert that should have caught the misconfiguration was also broken. And this kind of language is not helping the cognitive work that we talked about earlier, right? Going back to principle 1. What was that alert supposed to catch, right? What was broken about it? How did it become broken? How we got lucky. It happened during a low traffic time and not many users were impacted. You know, I saw 2:30 before. That seems like a time that folks might be buying things, and I'm curious how worldwide this e-commerce company is. Action items. Fix the bug, fix the alert, check all of our alerts to make sure they fired. You could also put these action items in any incident in the software industry, right? And so at the end of this incident review, I am left with a ton of questions, and it doesn't necessarily help me with future incidents. The organization is not totally likely to have gotten a lot of ROI out of this incident review and not spending time on it. It was kind of a box ticking exercise with not a lot of value that doesn't show the impactful and beneficial coordinative work. So that work's implied, but it's never actually explicitly stated. So I want you all to think about what questions you have about incident 1 and what we're missing, which is the context on the cognitive work. And I want to share something Rob said to me the other day.
Yeah, as we were talking about this, I've said this a few times, but my conclusion with relation to a lot of these incident reports and many other things that we write templates for is the more fields that you put in there, the less people think. Like, I want you to tell me what really happened, but I want you to think about it. And to your point of what went well and is 20 minutes good or not, there was a period where we had a cost of incident in our post-incident template. And people would fill it out and give like multiple decimal places on the penny, but miss entire categories of cost, right? There was like it was like, these 3 engineers showed up and we project their salary to be X and therefore it cost us this. It's like, what about the partners and the customers and the sentiment and the like apology tour that we had to go on, et cetera, et cetera. Each one of those is orders of magnitude bigger. And I think you need to get people out of kind of the weeds of those specific boxes and get them back up to think about the big picture.
So this brings us to investigation 2. So again, the same incident, but we're going to look at the cognitive work, which means we are going to look at how people spoke to each other during this incident in their chat tool. And so the way this one was different was it was conducted by an engineer outside of the main team, so it was a fresh perspective. And I want to share with you all, this is all based on a true story. They jumped straight into the cognitive work. They included evidence from previous deploys, some well before the event. They included teams impacted but not previously involved in the timeline. So remember, the last timeline only included the search team. And then it informed new team members around system dynamics, and the purpose was to engage the audience and to be read. The purpose of the incident review was to be engaged with, not to be filed. And they used a bunch of sources of data. They used various people like responders and execs and support. You know, Rob brought up a really good point. The cost of the incident was mapped to engineer's salary in that example, probably because an engineer was mapping the cost of an incident and they didn't think about outside of that world, right? Which is why it's important to get more folks involved. It involved dev tools and reporting systems. It involved written communication. It involved video recordings. And it involved understanding the types of people that were involved in the incident, how long they had been there, whether they were on call or not, when they jumped into the channel. And so we're going to jump into the chat of this particular incident. And we're going to start in what's called the key updates channel. And this is November 23rd. And so you can remember the last incident technically started on December 4th. So we're already back in time. So it's the key updates channel where senior engineer Justin Bacon is put on this project. There has to be these key updates for this particular vendor, and they have to do this really fast. And so he is receiving requests from internal teams related to the key change beta release. And this is just a typical project. We're not in the incident channel yet. But between November 23rd and November 30th, the search team received several pager-driven alerts on search not working. There's invalid and revoked keys, creating a source of confusion for the team. And so they introduced PR22 to avoid the noisy alerts as a result of the key change releases. And so to not alert when the key is invalid, because they're making this change, and so they don't want to be alerted on it anymore. And then the partition is created to hold the indices for December 6th, and so these are always created 2 days in advance. And then PR23 is introduced not to update the read aliases for live collections during a migration. So this was actually just some cleanup work where a teammate was doing something and they noticed a migration was taking longer than necessary, so they were just trying to be nice in this PR, but it wasn't related. And then between December 4th and December 6th, errors were detected, but there were no pages due to PR22, right? We had to rush through this project very quickly. We didn't have time to clean up our whole system. And this is where queries began not reaching the December 6th partition. So already we have a little bit more context about this incident, and the incident hasn't even started yet. We know that the engineering team was put on this special project for a special partner, and they were trying to get it out pretty quickly. Now let's jump into the spam detection channel, where fictional customer service agent Connor Jacobs is essentially helping fight bots from our competitors that are scraping our site. And so they're scraping our e-commerce site. They're trying to get our prices. And so he's working on this quick automation that's meant to stop the bots once and for all. And so he's kind of sitting in this channel, like he's being a good employee, but he's basically talking to himself. He's just giving everybody the context. We've all been there, right? We're like, does anyone care that I'm doing this thing right now? But he says, I'm working on an automation that should stop these bots once and for all. Posting here for posterity. He's deploying, and so this company also runs through manual tests. So that's something we learn now that we didn't learn in the previous incidents. And so one of the tests is add to cart. Looks good. Moving on to search next. Search isn't returning a SKU I just added in test. I'm assuming that is normal behavior. I mean, and he's just kind of being a good Samaritan at this org. Like, he didn't make any production changes. He's just, going through the process. Moving on to the second deploy. We'll run through tests on this one too. Now we jump into a third channel. So we're still not even in the incident channel yet. This is all surrounding context. This is the customer experience channel. So Natalie, who works on Connor's team, starts receiving some reports that customers can't access the results for the items from the promo emails that were sent out yesterday. We now have more context, right? So we now have engineering, marketing, product, all of these folks are involved, right? And we're also learning there were promo emails. So was this like a big time for the company? And so she's looking into it and managing them. They appear to be returning search results for other SKUs added before last week, so it seems like it's not an obvious down for search. And Connor happens to be in the channel because they're on the same team, and he's like, hey, this feels maybe related to what I was looking at. I'm going to page the search team, and he manually pages all of them, and they all join immediately. And when I saw this, I was like, wow, like what a great team. They all hop online immediately, like after being paged. And I wondered, what was happening? Like, how was Connor able to summon all of these people so quickly? And then I realized Connor is the second employee at this company. He holds a lot of weight. When you're getting a phone from Connor saying to hop online, the whole team's gonna hop online. So I'm starting to understand a little bit more of why this coordination was so smooth, right? There was a lot of team cohesion and trust already built in that maybe can't be repeated. So now we're finally in the incident channel, and the whole search team's been jumped online, right? And so they all have context into what's happening. And I also want to bring up, this whole team is in another part of the world, so it is midnight for all of them. And in the real story, it was like midnight on St. Patrick's Day, and they were all in Ireland, and they were having fun that night, but they all hopped online. And so Natalie, immediately knows that 12:05 and later are not in the read alias. She's going to update it. Melissa jumps on. She got page 2. I'll test when you need me. Okay, aliases are fixed. I wonder why that happened. You know what? I see the problem. It's related to PR23. A variable named update aliases overrode the method named update aliases. Ugh, Python. Now, this makes me want to dig deeper into the nuances of this team and this cohesion, and also Python in this organization. And I learned in this organization, Python is actually only used by this team. No other team at the organization uses Python. This team also has to switch back and forth between languages pretty frequently. And if anyone's worked in Python before, this is a very easy thing to happen. But now we've kind of dug into the conversation, right? We're starting to understand how people work together. We're starting to ask some questions, which can actually really improve our relationships in later projects, too, if we're involving all these people in this. So I want to pass it over to Rob.
What a great quote.
Yeah.
What intelligent person said that. I don't know if this is a weird idiosyncrasy of me, but I fundamentally believe this. And you mentioned Gen AI earlier, and I think there's a tension in tooling right now. Like there's a goal to take all these conversations and have something summarize them for you, but the information is in the detail. Like raw data doesn't lie. Raw data in this context being just conversation. Like this person said this person said this, not there was a fun discussion and Python is challenging. Like that, the way that that gets summarized is often not helpful. And generally, code doesn't lie. It does what it says it's going to do. I mean, it might not be what you wanted it to do, but it definitely is what it's written to do. On the other hand, LLMs do lie. So we're entering into an interesting time. But I fundamentally believe that going back and looking at the full context is going to be the answer to a lot of your questions.
Make your LLM show their work.
Exactly. Good luck with that. I think that's a problem we're still working on.
But what's also really important looking at an incident like this and looking at the cognitive work is seeing when different things were looked at, right? When were we trying to detect the incident? When were we diagnosing it? When were we repairing it? What key moments did people join at? And I think in our heads, an incident works very linearly. We detected it, we diagnosed it, we fixed it, we moved on. But what ends up happening actually looks a little bit more like this. You know, we have 3 different red herrings. Someone tries to diagnose it. Another engineer is trying to fix it while someone else is still diagnosing it. And maybe their fix is actually, compounding the incident a little bit. And what's important about visual representations like this, and this is actually in PagerDuty today, this kind of visual representation, is that people's minds go to different places, right? I bet everyone's mind in the audience went to a different place with this diagram, and you might be asking different questions. And Rob's mind went to an interesting place too, which we'll get to in a second. But we had a lot more key takeaways in Incident 2, right? There were multiple notions of what it meant for search to be working. Incident handling excellence was influenced by team cohesiveness and collaboration. Changing code with alerts has risk. There was an ease of coordination due to the familiarity of the team. This team had actually all worked together for the last several years. And so they all knew each other really well. And there was a quick awareness of the issue at hand. And there's always multiple roles and experiences to study and multiple people to invite to the meeting, if you have a meeting, or multiple people to send the doc to, or multiple people to send the learnings to. And it can be used to gain insights into other people's mental models. It can be used to gain insights into what they see when they look out the window. So let's talk about what's next. Now, we spoke a little bit about the visual of this report, right? Visual diagrams tend to engage people a lot more than this written linear timeline. And like I mentioned, when we showed something like this to Rob, his head went here.
I like all the dots, but I was like, what were we doing? Right? And on this timeline, it's compressed, it's like 8 minutes. But I think that's a big thing that never gets written up is, and then we literally stared at each other for 10 minutes because we had no idea what was going on, right? That gets glossed over, but it's super real and super important, right? Like, was it not clear who was in charge? Did we literally run out of ideas? Did we take a snack break because everyone was hangry? I don't know, but that's a really important detail, and it's not the first one that you started noting.
And And it's really important because I think we've all been in situations where something's gone awry and you're feeling a certain way. You might be feeling like, I told you so. You might have an axe to grind. We all have these biases that we come into when mistakes happen. And Rob might be having this feeling like, we should have been taking this more seriously. Like, why did we all take a coffee break during this, you know? But he might not want to use his social capital to like bring that up, right? And so actually leveraging something like this where you can see it's just the data. You know, we're just looking at the data and posing it as a question. What was going on here? Was it helpful for the incident? Was it not helpful for the incident? And so there's a lot of people to be included or sent the review, but it needs to live outside of that vacuum of just site reliability engineers. And it needs, you know, every parts of the org has their own post-incident reviews, and maybe they don't share them with each other. But it should include frontline support, dependent teams, future project managers, future team members, executives. And the wider you share these findings, the more they apply to audiences, the more opportunities for learning. And there's no one right way to do this. You know, I want you to think about how communication gets disseminated in your org. I've worked at orgs that were super meeting heavy. And that is how people find things out. No one reads anything. And then I've worked at orgs that are super documentation heavy. And you have better, you know, spent lots of time reading all the prep work before the meeting. So really think about how information gets disseminated and how people work in your culture when you're trying to get some of this information out. And when you're doing cognitive questioning, there's a lot of great things to do. You know, you want to establish rapport and use it as an opportunity to build trust. Instead of saying, you know, why did you push that button? Say, walk me through how you pushed this button, or how you were thinking about it, or how you thought to bring up this dashboard. Everyone that has participated in an incident or in the incident communications is an expert in some way. The goal is to also make them feel like an expert, because it gets them to share more. And go from general to specific, lob softball questions first, use prompts, listen and adjust, and use cognitive questioning. We actually have a free guide online that details a lot more than this, that is linked out here. But you can also use this for continuous learning. It can lead to onboarding and orientation, professional development, meta-analysis that reveals patterns. You can use it to advocate for headcount, for training, for planning promotion cycles, for quarterly planning, unlocking knowledge silos, finding those person A's before they leave, and knowledge gaps, and also background research for a new initiative. Remember, a lot of ROI lives in how we communicate during incidents and lives in what is urgent to us, what stopped us from doing what we were doing to all coordinate together. And so what does it mean to be done, right? Investigations could go on forever, and not every incident is worthy of going deep on, you know? And you know, there's no reason to read the whole Slack channel or the whole Teams channel of every incident. And that's actually something that you can leverage AI for, is pointing to the places where folks should look. Because your understanding of the incident is going to evolve over time. It's also important to relate incident reviews together. You know, this incident, maybe you had a really high traffic time during Black Friday this year and last year because you're an e-commerce company. You can compare how you did in previous years and see if you're actually improving. So some tips are: use more than customer impact to warrant a review. Look at what's anomalous in your organization. Did you have 30 people join this Slack channel and only 3 people were responding? Is that weird for your org? Did it happen in the middle of the night? Is that anomalous for your org? Think about what is bizarre and unique for your organization and use that to retrospect. Make it engaging, create a record, schedule and make time for learning, and don't break your promises to learn, and put the responsibility of running the incident review outside of person A. And so I want to hand it to Rob to talk about some of CircleCI's journey with this.
Yeah, the goal is to inspire hope. Hopefully this chart inspires hope. I'll get through this as quickly as I can, but just to try to explain, this is what we call our critical path, meaning builds running through our system. That's what matters. That's what we get paid for. And it's all normalized to a period back in the first quarter of 2022 where I guess my first build is just to say we were PagerDuty customers long before this because people always had to get out of bed, but we've done much more with it over time. And so around that time, we were kind of going through the motions. Everything that we've talked about here, like we're writing the checkbox, filling out the template, going back to doing the real work instead of understanding what was happening in our incidents. And we had sad customers. So basically, the reason I picked this time slice is every month for those 2 years, I wrote a blog post personally describing where we were on a reliability journey, because that's how sad our customers were. And that's normalized impact against that first quarter. So Q1 2024, that's when we stopped writing it because we were like, you know what, no one cares anymore. Like, we're doing this right. And that's a great thing. We went from a competitive challenge for us to a competitive strength. And so in early Q2, I put together a Tiger team. I went to every incident for a year because I said, we got to understand what's happening in these things, and just reading reports isn't getting me that information. We built the spreadsheet, which I believe every company has built, which is when did it start, when did it end, who was impacted, like really trying to understand what was happening in all of those incidents, what was the component that changed, if it was a component, how did we find out that there was an incident. You know the deal. We had an external sort of Slack incident management tool, and I said, why aren't we using it more? We were just using it to start channels. Let's go all in on it. It turned out that all it did was give us very strict templates that we could fill in the boxes. So we sort of backed out of it. Around that time, I had actually read the Howie Guide already, but I shared it with some other folks in the organization, and we said, oh, maybe we could actually learn from these things like in a more effective way. Q4, we kind of panicked, to be totally honest. We said maybe everyone in the company should just focus on this, but we didn't give them really clear objectives about what they were focusing on. So things looked great, but it was partly because that's the only thing we were doing. And then sure enough, Q1, when we stopped doing that, well, Kubernetes also. Turns out if you want to cause like a really big incident, cause an incident in your underlying infrastructure. Then we threw out the other tool, put together an internal Slack tool, basically said if all we're doing is starting conversations, we know how to do that. And then we really got the payoff. And the payoff is from the things that we learned in that first year, which are hard work, and saying we are going to go do the hard work on these systems. There are things that we know are broken, and we can't say, too bad, we need to ship this feature. Like, I'm stealing from someone else a great quote that reliability is our number one feature, and I think that lands in our organization as well. And if you're not willing to put in the work, you're not going to get there. And then based on all of that experience and realizing also that building your own internal Slack tools is not a great use of time, we added Jeli as part of PagerDuty just this quarter and started rolling it out.
Yeah, awesome. And yeah, like I mentioned, we've been working on integrating Jeli the past year. And so like a lot of the chat experience that is really focused on some of the coordination and communication and the cognitive work is now built into this. And so we're meant to like help folks like CircleCI, understand how work is getting done and understand how incidents are getting resolved so that they can keep improving in the future. And what I really want to underscore here is working to understand how experts think and talk creates more experts. We focus a lot as engineers, like if there's a single point of failure in our system, we freak out. But if there's a single point of failure and it's a person, we don't always do anything about it. I worked at one organization, and there was this person, and every time he joined the incident channel, everyone would react with the Batman emoji in Slack. And this guy was awesome. He could solve everything, but we were like, oh yeah, Batman's here. Batman was never on call, but he was always in every incident. And we kind of just like wrote it off. We were like, he's just magic. He just knows how things get done, and like we can't replicate him. And there's some folks that really are magic. I'm sure every person in this room, like if you were having a major incident, you could rattle off 3 engineers right now that you would definitely want on that incident call. And it's important to invest in those folks, but it's also important to scale them, because what happens is Batman's burn out and they go on somewhere else, and they also get really expensive over time. And so think about extracting knowledge from them so you can build up other people in your organization. And that is how work gets done more productively, and it helps you outside of incidents as well. And this can be hard to achieve over time, right? Like if you're going legacy and manual, you might have inefficient processes with excessive costs. I don't want folks to take from this like that they have to go read the Slack channel for every incident. Like use tooling to help you. automate some of the knowledge of where to look. And get a little bit more modern and automated in some of these things to really help reduce your costs. And we've actually released a lot of fun things over the last year with incident response efficiency, incident workflows, having tasks and roles within our Slack and Teams experiences, and using chat as a contact method. We launched a bunch of new things within our chat experience even last week. So if you are a PagerDuty user, I definitely encourage you to go check it out, because it's meant to really help with the cognitive and coordinative work. And also get the right people in the room quickly. So I'm not going off and trying to find Batman. We just know who the right person is. Along with scheduled analytics, narrative builder, which I showed the visual of earlier, showing where we were spending time in the incidents, responses on call report, custom fields. So if you are a larger organization or more enterprise organization, you have that customization capability. And like I mentioned, a lot of great stuff that works where you live, whether it be Slack or Teams or what have you. And then, we talked a little bit about what AI is good for and what AI is not good for. Definitely use it as a partner, right? And think about all the different teams involved in incidents and all the different people that need to know what's going on. Some folks might need the summary. Some folks might need all the details. Some folks might need to communicate with customers. PagerDuty Advances is an AI that's actually really great to help you with the coordination and communication behind all these different functions.
I'm going to stop reading my own quotes, but I guess I will just say you've heard enough of me talking about it. Like my takeaway from all of this is do the hard work, dig in, do the reading, talk to people, understand how they think about it. It's one of the richest sources of information in your organization, and the natural tendency seems to be to let it slide, to go back to doing what you were doing before, and what you were doing before is what got you into that mess. Don't miss that opportunity.
Incident reviews can really drive change in your organization. Incidents are expensive, and you are specifically spending money on them when you are in them. And so you might as well extract data out of them. You might as well get ROI. And that ROI is really hidden in how we speak to each other, how we communicate with each other when people join, and what they're looking at. And again, there's ways to partner and with automation and tooling to really lower your coordination and communication costs. We have a big booth in the Expo Center, so come by if you want a further demo on this. But thank you all.
Thank you.